and we started talking about some sleep aids. One of the biggest things that I know that people use is melatonin.
Mhm.
And so I want to talk about, is melatonin use good on a average basis just to like consistently use? I know people who just take it every single night. And I'm like, in my mind, I'm like, that's probably not a good idea, but I mean, I don't know. So is melatonin good or bad?
Um, Great question. That is the question. We do not have we don't have a 20-year study on people who took melatonin every night for 20 years, and this is what happened. We don't have those.
Mhm.
And then I think you probably saw that there's was a study way back. Oh, I'm forgetting the year. I'm sorry, but where they actually looked at all the different melatonin supplements and just to see how much was in each one. And they found that some of them had way more than reported, way less than reported. And so I think there's just that leads to just the difficulties in trying to study melatonin. Most of the studies that I tend to look up in granims and pediatrics with melatonin are they tend to be their circadian rhythm melatonin studies, which we know it works, where if you need to shift a circadian rhythm one way or the other, we know that taking exogenous melatonin, which means like taking melatonin at a specific time with specially timed light therapy, we know that you can actually shift your circadian rhythm one way or the other as needed.
Mm.
But that's usually a short-term brief, that's not like a years of doing it. That's like a short therapy. The other time that we see melatonin studies is in children with developmental delay, ADHD, autism, kids who we know have issues with kind of settling down or getting their normal melatonin regulation. The longest study I've seen is about a 2-year study on kids with autism. And I should have looked up to find out the author. I'm so sorry, but someone who's done actually a lot of really great work in this area, and found that after 2 years that the kids did not have withdrawal, they didn't have really significant side effects, and they actually did pretty well. So the way I look at melatonin is in a patient who's pretty healthy, just has some issues with sleep. I always say, okay, let's figure out how to use melatonin, lower dose, short term, but let's actually do other behavioral interventions at the same time so we can hopefully get you off of it so you don't need it. So, because I always feel like it could be a tool, but let's always see if we can kind of get you without it. So my patients who tend to have more neurologic abnormality, I think it's a little bit more complicated. So I think those who struggle with routine, those who kind of struggle with those things, sometimes actually keep them on it more long term,
Mm.
just because I do risk benefits where I'm just like, gosh, there's theoretic, risks that people are worried about having to be on melatonin long term. But I also know this kid's not sleeping. So I
Yeah.
think with parents, we always do this kind of risk benefit discussion. So that was a very long answer to say, is melatonin good, bad, or good? I think it's helpful. It's useful. I use it in my practice. But I always tell people, if you feel like you're using it every night, I think it's always worth kind of exploring, well, why? What else can we do? Can we do other things to make it a little bit better? And I always think it's good to try those things if you
And do,
can.
do you prescribe melatonin, or do you just have someone take over something over the counter?
Generally, you can prescribe it. I've rarely seen it, at least in the pharmacies I tend to prescribe. They usually say, oh, we don't have it, we have to order it. So I think a lot of times parents will just get it over the counter.
Yeah. And do you see like that's an issue? Because even you had said that each one is different, and I've seen studies with like multivitamins where they
Yeah.
said what is actually in the multivitamin, and so it was like 50% of the time there was either like way too much or not like enough whatsoever, and it's basically like flipping a coin when you like take a gummy or something like from a multivitamin. And so are there brands out there that you recommend for over the counter melatonin that are like they at least look at these a little bit more closely to make sure they're getting the accurate amount?
It's a great question. I hesitate to even say any brands. I think for each parent, what I say, I give them this kind of preamble of like, here's kind of, the limitations of it. What are you looking for? Okay, well, that looks kind of reasonable. Okay, it looks like you can buy it back from a major chain, or it looks pretty good. Let's try it out and let's kind of keep a close eye on it. So I think that's the best way to do it. Because I don't know, even brands say, oh, we're definitely monitoring. We definitely know I don't know. I guess I have to see if they show studies to prove that. So I think while we don't, we have that study that shows like it could be variable. I have had people who have taken, a brand of melatonin and had success with it and be able to get off of it. So I think it's, if they say, oh, he took it and nothing happened, or he took it and oh my gosh, he was like super groggy the next day. I'm like, oh, maybe the dose is much higher. So then we adjust.